All right, Mike, welcome. How are you, my brother?
Hey man, appreciate you having me on.
I
Excited for this.
appreciate I appreciate you coming on, man, and spend your Friday night with us. You have probably awesome, fantastic things you could do with your Friday night, and we're keeping you from all of those. So, Mike, why don't you maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what you've been up to over the last couple of years?
Yeah, first of all, I'm excited to be here, man. I've been looking forward to this for a while. But my story, I feel like I'm in kind of like 3.0 version of myself right now. So, 1.0 version, I ended up getting into sales kind of unexpected, right? There wasn't a day I woke up and I'm like, hey man, I'm excited. I'm going to be in sales someday. But what ended up happening is I grew up, I was always into creating. I played the drums as a youngster, and me and my brother, we used to, run around with a video camera, kind of like the kid on the Goldbergs, right? We used to create, and this is before we talked about creating content. But my
Mm,
friends and I, we used to write screenplays and run around in our summers and make like videos and all kinds of really cool stuff. So I knew I had this creative energy that, and then initially I wasn't really doing anything with it. I went to college and finally figured out that I can actually pursue my dream in podcast, or actually it was way before podcasting, but in media production in general. And so
mm,
I was doing that, but I'm in Buffalo, New York, and this isn't a shot at Buffalo, but there's not really a film industry here. So after I got my degree in media production, I was like, now what, right? So now I either have to move to LA, New York, go figure it out.
mhm,
Um, and I was about to do that, dude. I was about to move out to LA, and I was very serious with my girlfriend at the time, and she said to me, she's like, "If that's what you wanna pursue, like, go and figure it out, and maybe eventually I'll follow behind and all that." My uncle's out there. He lives in, Sherman Oaks, which is outside of LA, and he professionally works on film. He does,
mm,
digital recording for major motion pictures, so anything like I know he's worked on, the Planet of the Apes series that just kinda relaunched a few years ago. Um, he's worked on a bunch of J.J. Abrams movies, and there's a lot of I mean, he's worked on probably 100 films since he moved, and he made the move from Buffalo out
mm,
there. And the reason this seems like kind of a run-on story is just to connect some of the dots for you guys. So I grew up with this passion, and I graduated with a media productions degree. And it's like, now what? So do I go kind of hang out with my uncle in LA and see if I can get a job? He's like, you're going to be running coffee and stuff for the beginning, but you can come out here and see if you wanted to pursue a career out here. Originally, it was editing. I really enjoyed like nonlinear editing,
mm,
storytelling. Yeah, I always love that, like, the idea is that you can shoot a film, and then the way you edit it is gonna tell the story, right? So, and how
interesting.
long you hold on somebody's, re a shot, if it's quickly cut, is it one shot that for 10 minutes in a scene, and it actually makes you feel like you're in the moment? There's so many different ways you can do, the editing process. I was really connected to that. So that was originally my goal, is to go out there and be a film editor. And I don't wanna say he talked me out of it, but he was very real about the situation, like, "You're gonna come out here and have, like, a short, runway, and if you can figure it out, I'll help you," but, I didn't have necessarily a long runway with finances or anything like that. Um, and I actually was very serious with my girlfriend. We ended up getting married.
Hmm,
So, I also felt like there was this pull. There was like, go out there to make it happen or stay here and start a family, and so that's actually the decision I made. I decided to stay in Buffalo. I got married, I have a beautiful daughter, and I was married. I was, with she's now my ex-wife, so we'll jump ahead in the story. We were together for over 10 years,
mm,
so it was a very serious relationship, and at that time, I told you about getting bit by the sales bug, and it wasn't something I grew up thinking I was gonna get into, but to pay the bills, I had sales jobs, and I ended up getting really good at it, like winning
mm,
President's Circle awards and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I was like, "I'm really good at this thing I never really thought I'd be good at," and I enjoyed it. So I got recruited. This was when LinkedIn just came out, probably 2010, 11. Every award I won at the companies I was in, I'd put it up on LinkedIn because that's what it was at the time. It was literally just like a digital resume. There wasn't really, you're not posting content and stuff on there. Um, but recruiters used to look that stuff up and see like what you're doing. And I used to have recruiters hit my inbox and they tried to pitch me on their organization, and it's a Fortune 100, Fortune 500. So I started to work for some companies and do really well. And I did that for about 10 years. So, really
Mm.
learned the game. I kind of felt like a champ. I got married, making some good money, and my career was going in the right direction in that way, especially financially. And I had kind of the American dream. I got a house, beautiful daughter, everything's going good. And then in 2017, the divorce happened, and I kind of feel like that's when I went into Mike 2.0, and leads me into who I am today. Because at that moment in time, I had a reflection like, who do I want to be now? Because when you're married,
Mhm.
good, bad, or ugly. Like when you're married, it's a partnership. And my ex-wife never said like, you have to do this, you have to do that, you can't do anything creative. But it kind of the creativity ended up kind of, I don't want to say getting beaten out of me, but life does that to us. Society does that to us in school, right? Like if you have a dream, I want to be the next Steven Spielberg when you're like 8 years old. Eventually, by the time you get to college, like society's going to tell you there's only one of them. Like, and unfortunately, that happens. Um, and I'm gonna get into a conversation a little bit about the power of podcasting and how that can actually do the opposite in a good way. Um, so I ended up doing well, like I said, in sales. And in 17, I just realized like, who do I want to be? And I literally like moved into my new apartment. Imagine me standing there. The apartment's bare. There's a ton of boxes in there, and everything was my past. It was all stuff I have accumulated over my entire lifetime. And I remember thinking to myself, like, damn, I could do whatever I want right now. I don't
Mm.
have to answer to anybody. I don't have to say, hey, should I do this or should I not do this? And the idea that popped in my head was I should start a company, and it should be in media and marketing, especially media, because it can tie back into my media background that since I was a little kid and also in college. So that's how the dream was born for Social Chameleon. And I started that company in November of 2017. And everybody was like, "You're crazy. You shouldn't do this. You're going through a divorce. Like, you figure your shit out first, like your finances." And
Midlife crisis kinda thing, like
it was like I was 31. It was an early midlife crisis, but I didn't listen to any naysayers. I literally did it, and within a month, I launched my company. I put my 2 weeks in. I was a store manager at Sleep Number at the time, doing pretty well. They couldn't believe it. They're like, "Dude, you're having like a Pro Bowl year with the company. I don't like, why would you leave here?" I'm like, "Man, I love this company. I love serving our customers, but this isn't what, I was put on this planet to do, especially for like the
mm,
rest of my life. So I want to go and do something that I feel fulfilled to do." And how podcasting gets into the mix is I was listening to a lot of podcasts at that time when I was in sales. So every time I went to a customer's appointment, I was also in the insurance game for about 4 years. So I was doing a lot of driving around to meetings and trainings and customer appointments. And I called it a university on wheels. I had a lot of windshield time.
mm,
So I was listening to guys like, you know, um, Lewis House, Gary V, a
mhm.
little bit of Grant Cardone early day. Like he
Gotta
had a
listen
show
to a
called
little bit of Grant.
Grant had a show called Power Players. And what I used to do is peel off like whoever he interviewed. I would go in and listen to their show too. Like Lewis
Mm,
House is an example. He was talking about his football career with an injury. He ended up becoming an entrepreneur. And now we all know Lewis from the School of Greatness podcast,
mhm,
and his great books that he has out. And Ed Milet was probably the biggest influence for me at the time. Listened to like every episode of his early show, and his story about like getting the water turned off, and him and his wife had to sneak into the pool area to take a shower at their apartment. Now this guy's like a $400 million self-made man, but you know, um, the point is like he was there. He was at rock bottom at one point, and I kind of felt like I was going through it, this little bit of a rebirth rock bottom moment. Um, and it was like if the messaging on these podcasts, Grant will tell you the same thing, is if they can do it, so can you, right? Like go
mhm,
figure it out, live in your greatness. So I decided to start Social Chameleon in the early days, dude. It was not what you see today. It was literally I was doing anything media wise, helping people start a Facebook page and run ads,
mm,
website design, video, because I told you I love doing video and editing. So I was doing like commercial video for people, testimonial videos, which was a lot of fun. And actually, um, a friend of mine referred me over to this client. We were working on a video for them down in Florida, which is a nice little escape from Buffalo. It was February and snow, and I remember, and we fly out to like sunny Florida. and I'm doing this video, and it was great. They loved it. And then a little bit later that year, I launched Mic'd Up. I finally felt compelled to launch my own show, and this was time for me to do it. And a friend of mine just he asked me if I could do his show first, and I was doing it for lunch money, man. It was just like fun, you know. I didn't really know what I was doing at that time,
Mhm.
but because I took that opportunity, and I want the audience to key in on this. Like, I was happy to do it for little to no money because it was an experience. I wanted to learn how to do it. So the fact is, I was self-taught, watching a ton of YouTube videos on how to podcast and all this stuff. I did this professional show for 50 episodes, and that allowed me to launch my own podcast. And this client actually saw that I was doing this, and they saw my email come out that Mic'd Up episode 1 came out. This is going all the way back to like 2018, and they're like, "Dude, do you think you could do that for us?" It was a Dumb and Dumber moment.
Mm.
Remember the Brazilian bikini bus where
Mhm.
they're like, "Hey, we're looking for 2 guys to come on tour with us. Do you guys know anybody?" And they're like, "Oh, man, there's a town 5 miles down the road that way," you know?
Mhm.
And then they wave the bus down and they're like, "We're so stupid." You think that they're gonna be like, "Yeah, we can join you." No, the town is that way. So my Dumb and Dumber moment
Mhm.
was they asked me if I could do it for them, and I took that as like teach them how to podcast. So I put
Mm.
together this whole proposal about like, "Yeah, I can help you launch your show." They're like, "No, dude, we want you to just do it. Like produce
Yeah.
it, take care of it." So that was the light bulb moment, and I love doing it. And so at that point, I didn't even have to do any marketing. I was getting people asking me all the time. It was guests on my show as well, like, "Hey, I see you have a great podcast and you know what you're doing. Can you do this for us?" So it went from one client to quickly 5 to 10 to the point really quick, like early on, I couldn't handle all the shows. So I hired an intern. I'm like, you know, someone locally that was able to do some audio video. We quickly blew past the fact that, you know, there was too much work for him even to do. And so I scaled it up and I hired a team of multiple audio and video editors. I have a project manager now myself. And so the team has grown. And I literally scaled that from just a passion project to a six-figure business in a couple years. And I have no business experience, by the way, everybody. So, and I feel like I'm just arriving. Like now that I have a proven concept, I'm gonna take this thing and just continue to run with it. I love what I'm doing. And it's kind of cool, but it definitely wasn't by design.
Thank you for sharing that, Mike. And I don't know if you knew this, but you're already promoted to our IT guy because you helped us get these mic related issues. So
Yeah.
there you go, man. But so talk to me. You said you have no business experience. Obviously, you've done a lot of sales and worked for some legit companies. So saying you have no business experience isn't quite totally right. But what made you think and or want to be an entrepreneur? Because as you stated, you coulda went anywhere in your life.
Mhm.
You could've moved to Thailand and started fighting Muay Thai. Like, what was it that made you go, like, "I need to start a company," and not, "Oh, I need to change jobs. I need to get a haircut. I need to start,
Yeah.
you know, becoming a
That
bodybuilder."
That's a really good question right there. Um, what it was is so my sales career started in a music store. So I also play the drums. I think I may have quickly shared that, but so I have a music background. So I'm at a music store and they literally, it's a guitar store local, and they're like, we don't have anyone that knows drums. So they literally just called me the drum manager. And so
Mhm.
I learned how to talk to people at that experience and learned some sales presentation skills. And from there, that allowed me to get the job at Sleep Number that I mentioned I did very well at, eventually promoted to store manager. And in between that, there was also a stint where I was auto, life, and home sales for Liberty Mutual Insurance, and I did well for them. But so at the end of all that, and right at the moment of the divorce and having that moment of what do I want to do, I remember thinking to myself, like, I could sell mattresses and bedding, high end, like my average sale was like 4 grand, 4,500. I could sell insurance that nobody likes to talk to an insurance person. So if I can be comfortable doing that, talking about life insurance, literally the last thing that anyone on this planet wants to talk about. If I'm comfortable doing that, why don't like I'm good at those things. Why don't I sell something that I want to choose to talk about, which is media and helping people like get their messaging out. I love that branding concept. Um, in Buffalo, a lot of the smaller companies weren't doing a good job with like their own branding and marketing and stuff. I would ask a company like, "Why is your logo got this guy in a Quaker hat on it, and they're like, "We don't know. That's just like our great 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 grandfather. We don't really. There's no story behind it." So, I had fun, like, doing some branding and logo designs. And it's really cool. I see this gym that's blowing up, and my company designed the logo for them, and they're, like, really on the up in Buffalo, and it's like, we don't really do logo design anymore, but when I see something like that, it's pretty cool to see
Right.
how it was an idea in a notebook at a coffee shop, and now it's on the side of a building with big glass windows, and that's our logo. Um but yeah, to answer your question, why like the business experience, it was just more of a matter of I've done this for other companies. I get paid a fraction of a percentage for my commission. And why don't I do something I actually love? If I can sell anything, do what I love.
Mm. The
Yeah.
way I've heard it said is if you can excel at something that you don't love, think how good you'll be at something that you are passionate about. So
Yeah.
there's all these
That's so
people out
true.
there in your exact situation who are maybe kicking ass in their job, whether that be sales or management or wherever you're working, and you're like, "I'm excelling, I'm doing great. I'm just nervous to leave and go do my own thing or change careers or enter a new field." And it's like, well, light bulb, that Dumb and Dumber moment, like, "Hey, you're
Yeah.
really good at something that you hate. Think about how good you would be at something that you actually legitimately love and like."
That's it, and then I just took it and ran, and the word pivot was so overused during the pandemic because everybody had to pivot, but I luckily pivoted before the pandemic. It was right before that time, and I went from doing all these projects in person, which we were talking about this off camera, like doing this podcast remotely. You loved doing it more in person, which I totally get. You have that personality or kind of sitting on the couch with someone, having a coffee, and it has that laid back feel to it. But you can book a couple of those a week where going virtual, you can now do, 5, 7 days worth of not saying you would, but you can get people on. You can do 5 of them a day if you wanted to, and people can be anywhere in the world. CEOs all across the globe can jump on with you. So it just opens up what you can do. So that same moment happened for me where every time I did like a video shoot, it would take days of preparation. I get a crew with me, we'd shoot good, bad, or ugly. We'd go back and check the edits. There'd be issues sometimes it was good. And all of that, and then we'd get paid, and it was just like, dude, we never felt compensated for all the time, right? It was
Mhm.
frustrating. Where I loved podcasting because it's not only did I enjoy the podcast space and I was learning a lot from it myself, but it was great because people could record virtually, send us the files. Now a lot of it's even like there's different things like Riverside where it's all saved in a cloud, and people can send me the link to it, and now my team and I can go to town and turn that podcast into like a whole, brand experience where we can cut it and repurpose it into all kinds of social media content and stuff for their email blast. So that's why I loved it. I just saw the big picture. I'm like, I'm working so slow here because I'm kind of forced to do that before. And now going virtual has allowed us to work a lot faster and scale it up with companies all across we're more so US right now. I do have a Canadian client, but that'd be a stretch if I said international. I'd be really like, you know, bullshitting you. But
I think
yeah,
that
yeah, that's
what you
how the pivot happened right there.
what you hit on is really important too for business owners, potential business owners. It's that element of scale where, and I've talked about this before, where I call it like a people to productivity ratio. If you're going to go on site and start shooting video, it's like maybe you can do that alone, but it really helps to have at least one other person. So your
Yeah,
time is totally bound to being there on site, travel, things like that. You can only charge so much for your video. Like you're not shooting for
yeah,
Nike where you're like, yeah, it's gonna be $3 million for this commercial, and they're like,
right.
great. Yeah, that's reasonable. Like, you're
Yeah.
battling up against people's perception about how much you can actually charge for this, which I don't know. You tell me, you were in the space. Do people want to pay more than 2,500 bucks for a video? Like 3 grand, 5 grand for a
Yeah,
video?
no, some of them were in that range, but it definitely was to the point where, it weeded out a lot of the small business owners, and that's
Oh,
who I
yeah.
was really networking with. So whenever we were working with someone, they're like, you know, we almost felt bad, like, "I don't think this company
Yeah.
really has it," you know?
Yeah.
So it was a little awkward, but the thing that I did wrong, and I'd love to share this because anytime I make a mistake, I'm happy to teach someone to not make the same mistake I did, um, is when I was doing that, I was the business owner of the company, but I was also hiring a lot of like 1099 contractors to help me out because I was literally one person. And so whenever I did a video shoot, yeah, we'd have a videographer, maybe multiple. I was doing the editing myself in those days, but the better qualified somebody was, the more expensive they would be because I
Mhm.
can get a videographer to work for me, but they're doing 25, 100, 5 grand a weekend. Some of them were doing weddings, making over 5 grand a weekend, and then they'd be working with me and maybe like 1,000, 1,200, $1,500
Mhm.
project here and there. Um, so I was giving myself almost like a commission of it, right? Because I was running it, managing it, and everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes I was making a few $100, and I remember thinking to myself like, now this whole thing is backwards here. Like this ain't gonna work long term. I love doing it, but it just wasn't enough to. It wasn't you know, anything close to the income I was making as a W-2 employee. And so the goal was
Mhm.
obviously to replace that income quickly so I can get back to that level. So my recommendation to someone is figure out something that you can scale, but also make sure the cut of your own compensation does make sense for you. Um, and in the early days, you may have to do a lot of it yourself to get that, because otherwise, your profit's going to be very small when you get other people involved. So I'm not saying not to build a team. I just think you have to do it over time. I was trying to build a big team first before I had a proven concept.
Mm.
Once I started to do it, like I said, podcasting, I did it all myself at first and got a little bit of help over time until I could scale it because our percentages went way up because I was able to charge more. In the beginning, I wasn't able to charge as much because I was green. I didn't have a case study book. I didn't have examples. So I was willing to take almost anything in the beginning. But now we're working with very particular clients, and we're working with businesses, organizations, and people that have a budget for podcasting. They're not just doing like a fun show with their buddy, like a fantasy football show out of their basement or something. Like we love those shows, but that's not really who our, avatar is, if that makes
Mm.
sense. So, um, but yeah, there's so much more. I just want to say why I love podcasting is as a space, it's such a great place for people to go share their heart, share their stories, and there's not an agenda like older form like TV. When you're only getting stuff from a few talking heads, the CNNs, the Foxes, you're getting like 3 or 4 options of news.
Mm.
And with podcasting, it's not just news, but you're hearing like you're a fly in the wall for Elon Musk having a conversation with Joe Rogan. Like that wasn't happening, 20, 30 years ago. There was never an opportunity for a billionaire to just tell you how they got started.
Mm.
They m If they wrote a book, you'd get the book version, and books are great. I actually read books more than audio because I like to mark them up and highlight them. So reading is great, but you can never really pick the brain of the author,
Right.
where when an author comes on my podcast or your show or any show, they can now share those experiences and give you a little bit more backstory. So that's why to me, podcasting is an amazing medium. I don't think we've ever had anything like it as far as the behind the scenes of someone's character, personality. You're like hanging out with anyone you put it on, you're cutting the grass, and you can learn so much. I learned more through podcasting than I did through my education, including 4 years of college that I'm still paying for. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on something really important. When an author writes a book, it's a one-way conversation. He is telling you his perspective. It's kind of like after you watch a documentary, it doesn't matter what the documentary is about. Could
yeah,
be about like becoming a vegan. You watch it and you're like, I have to become a vegan. Oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Well,
yeah,
that was a one-way conversation. You don't get your chance to butt in and go, well, wait, what about this? Right?
mhm,
So they get to present to you exactly what they want. And I think that's one of the reasons why you think about, like, what would be the best conversation I could ever hear? Well, I would love to hear, like, someone sit down with former President Trump and President Biden and be like, "Hey, we got 4 hours. Let's talk." Because
yeah,
it's not a one-way conversation. It's not these crazy debate forums, right?
right,
Like,
yeah,
let's bring RFK Jr. in too. Like, let's all just talk. Like, we'll go 9 hours if we need to. Because when you say something, I wanna go, "Well, wait a minute. You said that, but hold on. What do you make out of this thing?" Whereas if you go to a whatever, a speech or a rally, They talk and they tell you all the things that they want to talk about, and then they leave, and that's it.
Yeah,
And if you
I
ask them any
understand.
hard hitting questions, everybody boos you, boo, and
Right.
then like we're not going. Okay, thank you for your question. We need to go. We need to be on our way now. Um,
But yeah, just to jump in on that, like the thing with podcasts is you can listen to both sides of the story. We're talking politics, so left, right, wherever you sit, and you can listen to people, but it's more open conversation. It's not as like clean cut or edited or agenda driven. There's not a producer in the studio saying we have to get everybody at the end of this has to feel a certain way. I'm sure there are podcasts that are more like that. But I know, like, the ones I enjoy listening to are really just someone opening up, it's off the cuff, it's like our conversation here, we had a little bit of an idea where we wanted to go, but you and I are both open where it's like whatever we can do, but we wanna serve the audience, so, that always felt really good about podcasting for me, so I'm happy to be in a space that I actually like, where when I was in the insurance game, like, I felt good that I was helping my clients and always doing the right thing for them, and it benefited me and my family, but I didn't like the insurance game. I didn't like that every year, my best client was gonna go up 12 to 13 to 15%, even if they didn't get into an accident or anything, and then I had to explain it. "Oh,
mhm.
well, the cost of repairs, and young drivers and all this bullshit," and it's like, they had nothing to do with it. I don't like it. I don't feel good. I'm getting out of
Mm,
here. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Well, that is something also I talk about for people. If you're thinking about starting a business, like make sure it's something that you're gonna feel good about selling.
Yeah, you
Don't
wanna put
don't
your head on the pillow at night and sleep well? I couldn't do it. There was another company I worked with, a marketing company for I was there for less than 30 days probably. I walked out on a Friday, I'm like every time I sold something, they couldn't deliver on it, my phone was ringing
mm,
off the hook, and, they would have us promise stuff that they literally couldn't keep up with the promise, and I couldn't sleep well. I was like, "I don't feel good, man." I had people I would meet for coffee, they'd be great, we'd become friends, and then I'd do something for them through that company, and the company would drop the ball all the time, and after 30 days, I'm like, "Fool me once, but man, this is like fool me 20 times in a row, and I have
mhm,
to leave." So I in that 30 days I was there, I probably saw about 10 people do the same thing, and so I know that their retention was horrible. Um,
mm,
so like you just said, what's cool about entrepreneurship is you can find the thing you really do love and feel good about and can sleep well at night because 'cause you're going to bat for something you care about, and, that's where I would start. That needs to be the North Star for
yeah.
sure.
So I have a question. Take me mentally back. Do you ever consider or think about what life would have been like if you would have gone to LA instead? That seemed like a really pivotal, fork in your road.
Yeah, there was a time when I didn't think about it at all, but kinda lately I did because, seeing some of the cool things my uncle's working on, not saying I'd be working on the same exact projects, but something like that where I'd go out there and, recently I've been making a note to at least once a week have some mic time where I can watch a movie or a TV series and just because for a long time, I wasn't watching anything, like, literally, like, no TV. I was just work mode all the time
Mm,
and spending time with my daughter. So, I kinda looked at it like, if I wasn't where I wanted to be in life, how can I, like, tap out and do something that's not driving me closer to where I want in business, but the problem is you get burned out if you don't
yeah.
have any, like, time off, so,
Oh, yeah.
lately, I've been watching a couple things, and anytime I watch something, I'm paying attention to how it's produced, the editing, and it does remind me of, like, it'd been kinda neat to do that. But at the same time, I really don't because what's cool about my gig now is I have freedom and I could spend time with my daughter and choose like when we're going to do stuff together. She does live with her mom, but we schedule like when she's here with my week, the weekends I get her and everything. Um, or, I get her on Fridays a lot. So I choose not to work that Friday.
Mm,
Um, I don't have to go into an office and say, I'm not going to work Friday. And I certainly know if I'm working on a film, right? And they're in the middle of production, they're not gonna be like, "We're just gonna let our editor not work on a Friday." So, I can work from anywhere right now. I could work from a coffee shop. I could be working with my daughter. Sometimes I'll have to jump in and do work, but I've been mindful to not do that when I'm with her. So I
mhm.
don't want her to feel like she's second place to my career. But she's excited. I actually started. She's 9 now, Isabel, and I've actually she's learned how to use Canva in school.
There you
So you
go.
probably heard of Canva. And some of our cover art we design on Canva. No, it's like, why not? So she knows how to do it. I'm like, hey, if you ever want to start working, with the company, you can do some cover art for us. And if you're interested in the audio and video stuff, we can get you up to speed. And when I mentioned to her that like 2 years ago, she wanted to work for Target because she liked the cash register with buttons. She was, when you're a
She's got
6-year-old
she's got
kid,
high aspirations there, Mike.
she's a 6-year-old kid, buttons and I actually wanted to be a cashier when I was her age at that point too. I thought it was really cool that like the drawer popped open with money in it. But now that she's starting to understand career, she's more interested to work with me and like actually potentially have her own business. And I had a really cool dad moment the other day, last Friday actually, or last Saturday. Um, Her school had a business fair and it was all student entrepreneurs. And so she
Mm,
had her own booth. She had a stand where she was selling bracelets that she made, you know, one bracelet $2, and then she had a 3 for 5 deal going
smart,
on.
smart.
And she was selling a lot of the 3 for 5s, man. She ended up making it was a 20 bucks in supplies. So she made her 20 bucks back in like the first few sales. And then she made probably another like 40 bucks after that. And I turned around and she kept going into the till and she was taking from the till. What are you doing? She was going and shopping at all of her friends' store
Uh,
places. I go, you know what? That's cool. I go, you got to support them too, but I want to make sure that you're not just blowing the, what are you doing over here? But that was
she
a really cool experience.
she clearly didn't read Mike Michalowicz's book, Profit First,
Yeah.
did she?
Yeah.
She was expenses first.
Create those envelopes, man. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great book, by the
I
way.
I saw that you had him on, and my business has done that for the last 9 years. It's amazing.
Yeah, you've been
He's the
doing the
guy, man. He's amazing.
I
Uh,
like that you can actually do that in QuickBooks. I have envelopes set up, that you can do because my bank, I tried to go into the bank. I think they say that in the either in his book or on his podcast. He says, "Go to the bank and just ask them to do this," but my bank wasn't doing it. So they're like, "Switch banks." There's some stipulation where if I pulled money out of my bank right now, there was like some ridiculous fee. So anyway, that's another little teaching lesson is read Profit First before you get into making a ton of money because then you can get out of, you can start at the right bank and
yeah.
make sure that they allow you to have different accounts you can easily move money around because that's the whole concept is being able to slide money over so you don't eat up your profit.
Mm. So talk to me about podcasts. A common thing that I hear people say is
Mhm.
there's too many podcasts out there. We don't need any more podcasts. What would you say to someone who made that claim?
I think it's like any other medium or content or anything. It's going to rise to the top, right? The cream, what do they say? Cream rises to the top. Is that what the saying is?
Sounds right.
Um,
I'm not
yes.
a dairy farmer, but I think that's
Yeah,
what it is.
I believe it is. The cream rises to the top. So it's the same idea here where, everyone a couple years ago was trying to be Joe Rogan or start something similar to that. It's like Joe became popular because he got into the game really early on. He was consistent. He'd have good guests on. He built relationships, all things you and I can do. And his show just served what his mission was for that. It wasn't really this tied to a business concept or anything. Um, where I think people make mistakes is if you're getting into podcasting, whether it's for you, your own company, or you're working for a business and they're like, we're going to start a podcast. If they get it into it first, saying we want to monetize and this is a
Mhm.
way for us to make money first, and they actually don't have a mission to it, they don't have excitement behind it, and they're not going to do it no matter what. Like you and I started our podcast early on because we were into it. Like we were excited about who we were going to meet and learn from them. And when you come at it from that right direction, it has a chance to succeed. If you come at it, it's just another thing we're going to do. Just like we don't like to write emails, but we have to.
Mm.
If you look at it that way, you know what? The people listening can feel that energy, and shows that are just built to exist will flop. And the majority of shows, there's a high percentage. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it was over 50% just a couple years ago that are not making it to their 10th episode,
Mhm.
right? And 1 in 5 makes it to 50 episodes. right? So you and I think you're over 50 episodes on your show now, right?
This honestly,
Yeah.
Mike might be number 50. You'll be really
Number
close.
50? So
Yeah.
you're now in the 17% is the number I have. And I do surveys once in a while just to see what people are saying, but that's on based on, like, over 100 people. And 17 of them are getting to their 50th episode.
Mm.
So that's the other thing, like, consistency. People may not even tune in to all your episodes. Of course, they're not gonna hear every single one. Maybe your super fans will, but they see what you're doing, and everybody keeps tabs, right? And when you fall off the face of the earth because you give up, because you didn't monetize it right away, or if you truly weren't even having fun in the first place, it's the first thing to go. My podcast, I'm just not gonna give it time and attention anymore. Um, and you just showed the people right there that you're easy to quit, right? You're easy to give up.
Mm.
Um, I'm not trying to say feather in my cap or anything, but with Mic'd Up, I mean, my first 200 episodes, I never missed a Monday. I literally, my father passed away, and that same week I was like producing an episode. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I just remember, I felt like Cal Ripken, like I don't want to not play the
Mm.
game, you know. So once I got to 200 episodes this Christmas time, I chose to spend more time with my family, and I ended up taking a little bit of a break. But now I'm gearing back up to get into that weekly routine where I don't miss. Um, but my point in sharing that is, like, I'm not saying the show is good, bad, or anything. It was consistent though. I
Mm.
told myself I was going to do it, and I did it. So do I think there's too many shows? Um, I'm not really concerned about it. Like I said, the good shows are going to be there. You're going to find ones that you like, and regardless of if there's a lot of bad shows. I don't think that should deter someone from starting their show, because who's to say that you're not the next big show in your niche, right?
Mm.
Um, if you and here's the other thing, a mistake that people make is they think to monetize a show you need 1 million downloads per episode. Furthest thing from the truth. A friend of mine, he actually coaches people on how to monetize their show. That's like his one thing that he does, and it's for small, like small business owners and entrepreneurs. And what he does is he has people interview people that are prospective clients for his business, or he teaches them, like, if you're, I don't know, pick an industry, it doesn't really matter, right? Amazon, right? If you're looking to get people into your business, and maybe you get a cut if someone starts their own Amazon business and you're their mentor. I don't know how it works, but I'm just making this up. If you got compensated for that, it would be in your best interest to help people to do it, right?
Mhm.
So if you're doing that and you had a podcast and you were interviewing, people who would be potential business owners in the Amazon space, they know, like, and trust you. They're going to want to work with you, and likely they'll come to you and be like, "Hey, can you help us launch our business?" I'm not saying you would do that, but that's how people need to think about it, because even if they're getting 20 people a week listening to their show, it's not about that count. It's about how many relationships they're building, and eventually, even without saying, "Hey, I'd love you to work with me," or whatever, people come to you. I realized that by accident. Mic'd Up
Mm.
was my show, it still is my show, that didn't have a purpose to monetize. It was literally, I just wanted to talk with other entrepreneurs and learn how they were further ahead. And you mentioned some really cool people you interviewed on this show. I've had, like, Olympic gold medalists on, and some, highly, like, some really cool people from all walks of life that have just done incredible things. Um, and my point is, they come to me when they want to launch a podcast, because they know I can trust me, and they know I do that. And so I don't even go to them and be like, "Hey, man, whenever you're thinking about launching a show, come back to me." Because then you don't want people to feel that the only reason you had them on your show is because you want to sell them something. I've
Right.
literally had someone try to sell me their program while interviewing me. It was the
Mm.
most it was the most uncomfortable thing, because I'm like, "I know what you're doing, and I don't like it." I
Right.
forget, there's a movie, I think, Adam Sandler says it. Is it in Billy Madison or Happy Gilmore? He's like, "I know what you're doing, and I don't like it." It was like that. I felt that on the show.
Mm.
So you gotta come from it with the right heart, and it will work.
Yeah, I think if I was to say, "Well, there's too many Instagram accounts. You don't need another Instagram account out there."
Yeah.
People would go, "Well, I wanna create an Instagram account. It's for me. I'm doing it for me, and people
Yeah.
like it, great." obviously
Mhm.
everyone wants it to be liked. Like, let's not lie to ourselves and act
Yeah.
like I don't care if I never get a single like. Everyone wants to get those likes and comments and attention and followers.
Mhm.
But it's funny that when you go to podcast, people go like, we you don't need another podcast about business or
Yeah.
whatever your topic is. And to your point, the individuals who just stick to it are the ones that tend to do all right for themselves. You
Yeah,
cited
and you
Joe
figure it
Rogan.
out, man. Anybody, like, you're not gonna be great in the beginning, right?
Yeah,
Or
true.
if you are great, like, already on the microphone and you got a good personality for it, you'll get further ahead. But the point is, like, until you do it, there's gonna be different iterations of the business, what you're or of the podcast, what you're trying to get out of it, the people you have on will change over time. Um, but it's like anything, you learn and grow with it, and so if you never get started because 'cause you're afraid that someone's gonna think, "Oh, and here's another podcaster," like, let that just don't even worry about that, because that person's probably saying it because they didn't do one, and now they're likely they feel funny about it. So if they can kind of knock someone else down, not that we're getting into psychology over here, but that is something that happens for sure. People are doing that with me when I started my business. They're like, "You go back to, you were highly successful over there. If this thing doesn't work out, you should go back." I'm like, "That's your threshold of give up.
Mm.
That's not my threshold of give up." Like, I need to be pretty much buried underground with no air supply before I give up, So, and even then I'll probably be like, Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 where the hand pops through, you know what I mean?
Yep, great reference. Thank you for that.
So, yeah.
Well, I'll comment on that, but what I was gonna say is, Joe Rogan, I just heard him say, someone asked, like, "When did you start making money with your podcast?" And he goes, "I don't know, year 5?" And I was like, "Oh, year
Yeah.
5? Like, I'm hoping we're not year 5." But to
Yeah.
your point, I've met plenty of people who they'll have some, like, hobby, passion thing, and I'm like, "Oh, you should start, like, a food blog. You love food, like, you love going to new restaurants in town. You should start a food blog." And they'll just go
Mhm.
like, yeah." And
Yeah,
I'm like,
maybe.
"Oh, okay. You're not a doer." And that's not to say you're a bad person, but I'm a doer. I've proven to myself I'm a doer, and I'll say
Yeah.
like, "I'm gonna do this thing," and then I'll just go do it. And maybe I don't always stick with it and say like, "Yeah, this is my calling. I'm gonna do it for the rest of my life." But
Mhm.
if I say I wanna do something, like, it'll stick in my mind until I actually go out there and do it because I believe that
Yeah.
I'm capable of doing it.
I thought of something too on your original question, like, should people is there too many things, or what would you say about, like, the perception that there's too many of them, so people need to kinda chill? D I'll answer it a little different. Do or ask it maybe even a little different. Do I think that everybody should start a podcast? Kinda like how everybody should have social media to connect with one another in 2024. The answer is no, because I don't think if you're not comfortable on the microphone, or if you're not interested to be on the microphone because you don't want to be on the microphone, and you don't have stories to tell or content to create that you feel passionate about, then absolutely no. Why would that should that person have a podcast? But I feel that everyone, I mean, it's kind of, if you don't have social media now, I don't know, like, as long as you're making phone calls to your connected. I have one person I know, I'm not gonna name who it is, but they're, like, refusing to use social media, and I okay, cool, you make a point, but, like, I have a hard time, every time I'm talking to that person, they don't know any updates about, like, our favorite sports teams because 'cause they're not on social seeing the updates every day, so I feel like I'm breaking the news. They don't know anything going on in the world, and I'm
Mm,
like, "It's all on social." Like, there's bad stuff that you want to avoid, but algorithms, I hated them at first, and now I love them. It's like, I'm seeing stuff I care about. Like, why should I get mad about that? So, yeah, the whole thing, not everybody needs a show, um, but I don't want to see, like, I would encourage people, if you wanna do a show, don't let that idea that we don't need another one slow you down, 'cause I'd love to see someone's new show and a new idea that's fresh.
mm. Yeah, and one thing I've talked about often on this podcast is we feel like everyone is really paying attention to us. Like, if I start a podcast, everyone's like they're gonna be watching it and listening to my every word, and they're gonna say, "That Mike guy, he doesn't know how to
Yeah,
speak, and he's not good at having conversations." And the reality is most people go, "Oh, Mike started a podcast? Okay." Or it's like,
yeah,
"Where do I know Mike from? do I know Mike? I think I might have met him one time at this networking event, and they're just like, "Okay, whatever," and they just keep scrolling through LinkedIn or Facebook
Yeah.
or social media or whatever it is. People generally just don't care nearly as much about the thing that you believe they care about. They don't care about you, and I don't wanna sound harsh when I say that, but
Yeah.
this was a lesson that I
You're
learned
overthinking it too, yeah.
when I became an entrepreneur. I've told this story before, but I posted, like, on Facebook. This was I'm showing my age because Facebook was the predominant social media platform at that
And you
time.
you needed a .edu.
Yep,
Yeah,
and, I posted, "I'm starting this business," and I thought I was, like, gonna get, like, awarded with fanfare. "Wow, Alex is starting a business. This is so cool," and I got, like, 12 likes, and
uh-huh,
then you scroll down, you see somebody post a picture of their puppy, and it's got, like, 300 likes, and you're
yeah,
like, why doesn't anyone care? I'm doing something important. Like, you just adopted a dog. Like, everyone
right,
has a dog, okay? This is
yeah.
not
Which
anything.
is very important, by the way, but here's a big moment. You're taking a leap of faith on yourself into a business. You're looking for a little bit more, and that's a really good thing to talk about. You're looking for an affirmation for your decision,
Mhm.
and I'm an affirmation person. That's one of my languages of, the pat on the back, and it's not that I necessarily, like, need the extra praise. I just like to know, like, did I make a good decision? Like a little bit of that, and like, yeah, you did the right thing, Mike. Like, I'm kind of in that. I'm not a great decisive person with little things like at the grocery store. Is this the right one? Is this the right kind of sauce? People hate going grocery shopping with me because I'm like asking all these questions about each little thing. The bag of chips, I'm reading the back, checking, all the ingredients. I have dietary restrictions and stuff, so I have to do that. But my point is, like, just looking for that affirmation, like, yes, that's a good one. Take it and run with it. And you were just looking for people to be like, oh, awesome, Alex. Like, we're rooting for you. But the reality is, a lot of people probably were, and the people that were most important to you certainly did. But yeah, I totally feel you on that. Um, I also know this: someone sees a cute dog, their restriction to press the like button is 0%. But if someone was kinda watching what you're doing and they're not super close to you, people get funny, I think, about, like, if I like it, just now what? Like, especially I notice that with, depending on who the person is or whatever, how close you know them. If you like too many posts by someone, now they think you're a stalker or something. Like, "You
Mm.
like 3 of my posts in a week. Is that too many for me to like of your posts?" Like, I like what you're doing? I just think there's too many dynamics around it, and to just forget about the bullshit because, now your show's doing great and because you stuck with it. And if you would have gave up, or your business even is doing great, if you gave up because you only got 12 likes on Facebook, um, a lot of people do that. They give up because it's not what they think the world is supposed to gift them with or whatever. But like, you got to go and create it, man, and make it what you want it to be. And you've done that.
Yeah, absolutely, and the
Yeah.
thing that I take away from it now is just that everyone is focused on themselves, so if you want to do something and you feel as if it is right, just do it. And if
Hmm.
whatever 15 people that you've had a passing interaction with at some point in your life think like, "Oh, Alex is dumb. That business is never going to work." It's like, we haven't seen each other in 12 years. Like, I do not care what you think about my life. Like, you go
Right.
focus on your life, you know? You
Yeah.
you deal with the things that you got to deal with in your life. I'm doing the same. So, people just aren't gonna get too high or too low on anything that you do. And we have, I think, this fear
Hmm.
specifically around starting a business or starting a podcast that I'm going to look foolish in the eyes of like these people. Like, who are these people?
Right.
You have a group of about 10 people, maybe 15, 20 in your life that you want to
Hmm.
represent yourself well to. Outside of that, don't bother. It's not going to change your day-to-day interactions with anyone if
Right.
someone you interacted with some point 10 years ago is like, Mike's not qualified to start a podcast. Like, come on,
Yeah.
man.
In the podcast that you and I love listening to, if the host or hosts of that show were afraid of that stuff, they never would have got to where they are,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And,
Uh,
yeah, so what I would say, another piggyback thought on that is the 12 likes, the 12 people, I'm stuck on that number 12. What I'd like to see people do, if you're early on as an entrepreneur, my best advice to you is get around 12 people in a mastermind group that are like-minded, that are looking to go, in the to serve within their own greatness. Get around that people, because that's who you want feedback from.
Yeah.
People doing what you're looking to do. They're going to get it. They're going to know when you're struggling. They're going to want to help you. Your friend from college, you might love the person. They might be awesome to hang out with here and there. But when you get a beer with them, they're going to want to talk about stuff from 20 years ago and not care or know how to help you with your business. But this person from another state that's connecting with you on Zoom right now, that's running a similar business, they care and can help you. And like, that's who you want to be hanging out with. So, um, that would be my greatest advice, is like, get around the right people. And a second random piece of advice that has been heavy on my heart lately that I'd love to get out. If you're going to get mentorship and you're going to pay for it, I've made mistakes in the past of paying for mentorship. I had some good coaches. I've had some great coaches, no fault of their own, but get mentorship in the space that you're looking to
Mm,
thrive in, that actually have done the things you're looking to do. Because I've had
yeah.
great coaches, but they don't know how to build a podcast, scale a podcast, or work with podcast clients at all. So they're giving me coaching tips that are real general things, which doesn't mean that it's not good for me to hear. But I'm like, man, I want to know how to. If I'm looking to build a gym, I don't want someone who's a restaurant owner to be my coach. I want a gym owner who's doing, an exceptional job, like career, they're able to take their family to where they want to go. Like, they're in good financial standing, right? Like, someone who's turned it into a real legitimate business. That's who I want to coach me, not just somebody who's. So that's my advice, because you can spend a lot of money on things and expect that the dollar amount spent equals the value you're going to get, and that's not always true.
Yeah, and I think to your point, most people are not like-minded. If you are thinking like you and I were, like, I want to start a business, I want to scale it to 10, 15, 20 employees, maybe I want to live remote and, move down to Monterrey, Mexico and just live and enjoy that. Like
Yeah.
that idea in most people's brain is like insane. Like you're crazy to think about
Hmm.
that. Most people think it's crazy to run a marathon, but I can find 10,000 people in my city that wanna do it, right?
Right.
So it's like you just need to get around the right people because as I stated, a lot of people are not like doers where they're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, I love being a foodie," but I'm like, "Start a food blog," and they're just like, "Nah." So, like, the what they are thinking about and how they are thinking about it is just fundamentally different from you.
Hmm.
One of the first persons I had on my podcast said, uh it's easy to say nay, even a goat can do that. So I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty good," Dave. He's funny, but yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to me, what are some of the misconceptions about starting a podcast maybe?
Um, misconceptions are going to be. I think we talked about some of the big ones, like that. The numbers, if the numbers don't come, that they're never going to come. Like, I think people shoot it down, or start. They stop their show too soon because of that. Like, but the other thing is, I think talking to a lot of business owners that I've worked with, they assume it's going to either cost a lot more than they think, as far as like gear and stuff. I mean, you and I have some that we're using a Shure MV7. I mean, you have a couple things behind the board and stuff, but literally for like under $1,000, you can get it, all the equipment you need, and then that can be, something you grow over time. So like the cost, and that's probably also, I know that's not probably, it's true. Why there are so many podcasts is like the cost of
Yeah,
to get into it is so cheap, right? You can literally do it almost like you can do it off of your computer with no microphone, or your phone even. And I don't recommend you do that, because people do want to listen to good sounding audio. That's
yeah,
definitely true. But my point is, like, the cost to get into it is so little, right? So there should be no reason, if cost is your issue, like, that's not a good excuse to not get started.
mm,
Just as you start to make more money in either your business, if your podcast is like your side hustle type deal, or if you don't own a business and you're working at a company, you can scale up your podcast over time, right? You should be wanting to learn and grow and get better over time. I think the other thing is that people feel it's hard to get guests on a show, and I've heard that from a lot of people that I've coached. Like, they're real concerned that they're not going to get either good guests or get people to say yes to them. And that was actually, um, the opposite of my experience. Like when I launched Mic'd Up, I was pleasantly surprised. Like my first 12, 15 guests all said yes right out of the gate. And I was getting some
Mm,
pretty good people on there that I didn't really know that well. I was just kind of randomly inboxing them. Now, again, 2018, a little different than now because I was able to get some people who were just getting into the podcast game. Like Ed Milet's show just came out shortly before that. Like there were some people, if you told them, I actually interviewed him as a co-host on my friend's show, and he was willing to come on, but it was like probably now it's gonna be a lot harder to get him on, right?
yeah.
So so I think that played into it. But the story I want to get to you is people love to be on a show because they get to express, this is my story, this is what I'm doing, I'm helping people out, whatever it is. And so it's not as hard to get someone to say yes to be on. I think I've only had one person say no, and it's because they actually wanted to get compensated like some crazy amount to be on the show. And I ended up turning them down because I'm like, everybody else has been happy to share their time and story because they want to do something out of the kindness of their heart. And if you want to get compensated for that, I'm like, no, we're good.
I've had
Um,
wealthier and bigger guests not need
yeah,
paid, buddy.
exactly, exactly. That's exactly how I felt. So now I probably can reach back out, but I'm not going to because it's kind of
Yeah.
like you had the opportunity, you burned, and they didn't even reach back out to me. They had like their assistant like respond to the email and say no. So I knew it was just kind of BS, but so that would be a barrier that I think people can totally get rid of. If you feel like you're afraid to get started because you're worried about getting guests, what I would say is if you don't have an assistant or someone on your team that can help you with like scheduling, it's definitely just like sales. You need to nourish a list, reach
Mhm.
out to a bunch of people. Most people are not going to necessarily say no because they don't want to be on the show, but realize that a lot of like really good guests are getting hit up by a ton of companies now. When I started, there weren't even companies doing guest sourcing, but now it's like I probably get 5 or 10 of them a week in my inbox.
Mm.
Um, and like with people who want to have people on mic'd up, like, oh, I represent John Smith and he would be a great, here's why he's good. And they have their one pager. And then I have to read through them and decide to pick people. But I've been blessed. I'm in a position where I don't really have to do that, where I have so many great people coming through me through networking that I'm actually like, hey, I want to get you on the show, opposed to having someone on my team be like, hey, I need you to give me like 100 names so I can pick off of the list. Not saying there's anything wrong doing that because some people do need to do that or whatever, but um, I think when you get started and you do the right things, there's going to be so many guest opportunities. And
Mm.
speaking of opportunity, I want to thank Anne Marie. She's the one who connected you and I, which is why I'm on the show.
That's my
Anne Marie
gal.
Tamrowski, yeah. So she's awesome.
What about the profit potential of a podcast?
Yeah, I would say um, you can profit your show in many different ways. You can do it from affiliate links, so there's potential there depending on how many downloads you get. If you have a show that's doing a lot of downloads and you're not profiting, you're probably not doing a good job with your affiliates, so that's an opportunity. If you're getting downloads and not making money, you need to be getting better sponsorship opportunities, so check that out. Um,
How
and
big do you
then
think a podcast needs to be to legitimately get sponsorship opportunities?
well, it depends because like I know shows that are getting 2, 3, 4, $500 a month, which is considered small, but it's also covering their costs to do it. So now like their passion project podcast costs are taken care of.
Mhm.
So they'll actually do the show more like with less, oh man, this costs me to produce my show every month.
Mhm.
But, if you wanna get something substantial, you definitely need to be getting, above, I'd say 5,000 downloads an episode before you're gonna get the attention of, like, a bigger player in the space. Um, but that's also my recommendation for sponsorships is, I wouldn't sell out to someone because your audience is gonna they want you to be authentic,
Mhm.
and if you're not, like, it's not gonna work out. People won't tune in if you're not authentic. Like, that's just step 1. But if you start to just do sponsorships that seem like they're off the wall, I think that will turn people away. So I've actually, purchased things or tried things that were sponsorships on podcasts that I listen to because I know that, the person that's pitching the product actually would use it or does use it. So on
Mm.
my show, I only have 3 sponsors right now. Magic Mind being one of them. I don't know if I can say this on your show, but I am. Like, I
You
actually
sure?
take
Sure
this
can, man.
Magic Mind. This is an empty bottle because I crushed it earlier today. So, like, they reached out to me and I said, I want like a couple weeks to try it out first, and if I like it, I'd happily promote it. And then Navigator Bookkeeping's my other sponsor on the show. I actually use their services for my business for Social Chameleon, and they do a fantastic job. And then obviously I promote Social Chameleon on my show. So like those three are things that I can talk about. If you and I bumped into each other at a coffee shop, I'd already promote them for free. Why
Mhm.
not do it on my show? So I was able to monetize my show that way, but really the way that I personally monetized Mic'd Up was getting guests on the show that eventually wanted me to produce their podcast, and
Yeah.
that's when I was like, "Oh, that makes total sense."
So maybe just talk to me because you deal with a lot of podcasts. We're talking about numbers and downloads. What starts to separate the low to the middle of the road podcasts from the ones that begin to rise up the ranks and you go, "Oh, like they're actually doing something."
Yeah. What I've noticed is there's something called Listen Notes. If you've ever heard it, you can check your show out on Listen Notes, and it lets you know what percentage you are as like the top downloaded shows. Just a good way to like get a little bit of a litmus test on how we're doing. Are we growing? Um, and there's been shows that I produced where we hit, most of the shows I produce hit 10%, top 10%, top 5%. I believe I'm in the top 5% currently and moving up. And some of the shows I produced have been top one percenters. And the difference right there is just has to do more with the guest than the host. So obviously, like the guests you get on your
Mm,
show, the bigger guests you can get on. So that has to do more with somebody's network, because the particular shows that I know have done bigger numbers, um, the person's network is just larger, or they have more money, so they can get around people who want to hang out with them because of their status.
mm,
Um, and I'll also say, like, it depends where someone starts. If an actor that's a famous person, actor doesn't have a show, but they started one, I'm going to pick on someone, Matthew McConaughey. I don't know if he has his own show, but if he did tomorrow, it would have more downloads than you and I are going to get this week. I'll tell you that
right,
much.
right.
Um, does that mean that he's a better interviewer than you and I? No, he might be really good, but he might actually suck. But he's gonna get downloads. So I really try to like not let that discourage anybody. You're looking it up to see if he has one. I love it.
No, I'm looking up the name of this gal that do you
Oh,
know
okay.
this girl, Alex Earl?
Mm-mm.
Well, don't worry, she won't hear this. She's an
Yeah,
enormous influencer, but she started a podcast and she's 23. She's like in college, and I don't know how she got so big. TikTok definitely had a role in it, but
yeah,
by like in her first episodes, like her sitting on her bed with like a really bad camera, and she's got like
uh-huh,
it's like a little hand mic, tiny mic, and
yeah,
it's like the slot behind JRE, and I'm just like,
yeah.
and she's not a good interviewer, she's not particularly articulate, she
I
didn't
bet
even do an interview, she just sits and kinda talks
I'm gonna
like
tell you
some of
why
her
she's
rant.
popular. I don't even know who this is, but I'm gonna tell you right now why she's popular. Because everything you just said. She just does it. She's sitting on her bed. I'm guessing, is she cute? Is she pretty?
She's an attractive
Okay, she's an
23-year-old girl.
attractive 23-year-old girl. So that's got, obviously people influence to tune in. Um, and there is magic behind the more authentic
I agree,
situation
I
too.
totally do
Like,
agree with
I
that.
always am on this weird balance of like, I want my show to look and sound good, but the overproduced you can get, the more sterile an environment gets, the less creative energy is there. So like, there's a good mix of like getting your space, like your space when you're doing in person had this good vibe to it. I watched a couple of your interviews that you did there. And next, I'd love to be on the show again at some point. We can do an in person one. I'll make the drive to Columbus. But
Yeah,
um,
sorry to interrupt, but we just
yeah,
broke ground on our new facility, man, so
and you're gonna do it.
we're
Yeah,
gonna have something good in
S-
there.
yeah. But like, so there is this balance of getting it right. But there's a girl I knew. She was on my show. I'm gonna name her Sarah Grace Hallis. She blew up on TikTok. She At the time I interviewed her, she had over 500,000 followers on TikTok.
Mm,
And what she would do is every day she shared her story, how I forget if she was married or got if they were just together. but basically her and her boyfriend, or her and her husband, broke up, and then after that she found out she was pregnant, and she documented every stage of like her pregnancy, and every stage of like family like turning their backs on her, or she was like ostracized because now she's pregnant and she's single, and all this stuff that like women could be going through. She's crying on there, being authentic, not looking for clicks, but like she was super vulnerable in her story. The lighting didn't matter. She was in her car. She could be wearing, just a sweatshirt. She wasn't putting makeup on before the thing, right?
Mhm.
And she got all these followers. And I remember like thinking when I was interviewing her and preparing for it, and she even talked about it on my show. The reason she blew up is because she wasn't overproduced. She was just authentic in the moment. And I think with the podcast, it's the same thing. You're going to see some people with bigger numbers, but not everybody's willing to get dirty and vulnerable and like actually share a story that's going to get more hits. And so I do encourage people to like come on a show. I mean, I think in the first 30 seconds I told you that I was divorced, like rock bottom, and like in an apartment with nothing on the walls, and had this like midlife crisis at 31. I started there with my story. It wasn't super intentional, but like I'm not afraid to talk about my failures anymore, because if it can actually help someone get further in life because they heard something I said, and maybe they feel different about themselves or more comfortable about something, like, if we hide all that, then we're not being real. And like it's more important in 2024 to be real than ever before, because social media finds you out in
Yeah.
5 seconds. So anyone who's still doing the like fake Lambo pics and like all that bullshit, you're not cool anymore. Nobody gives a shit. If you don't really have something good to say, it doesn't matter. I see this a lot. There's like, a lot of these girls, they look amazing and they don't actually talk at all on their Instagram. Have you seen this? Where they
Mm,
just put all like different audios behind them, and they're just like looking away on like a boomerang video. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I get why there's a lot of people following these accounts, because she's gorgeous or whatever, but there's zero value to it.
mm,
Right? So, like, if that person started a podcast, I don't think it would be big, because there's no value to what the show would be. It might be big for, like, the first second, but, like, Call Her Daddy, that's a big show
yeah.
but they're talking about real life situations, boyfriends, this and that, things that are going on in their sex lives, all this stuff. The show's popular because the vulnerability of, like, being real, and most people, you're not hearing that. You're hearing that from your guy friends, and girlfriends are talking about that, like, when they're getting together, but you're not hearing about it, like, on a TV show for real, and you're not hearing about it, like, from other people's perspectives. But another reason I love podcasting is there's an opportunity. Now there's an avenue to learn about this stuff, this real life stuff that no one wants to actually talk about because they feel funny. Now there's a platform for it. So
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about with kind of those,
yeah.
Instagram types that don't have a personality. It's sort of the Mr. Beast effect, right? Where he's like, I want to be personality-less, essentially, because I don't want you to pick something that you could dislike about this video. So I want to
Yeah.
make myself like amorphous, essentially.
Hmm.
And if you don't like the video, it wasn't because you didn't like my personality. Um,
Yeah.
so
Here's
with
an
the,
encouraging thing, Alex, and then we go wherever you want. Mr. Beast was who 6 years ago?
I mean, I don't know his real name, but I'm sure that he was just some kid. I mean,
He
just
was some kid. He
loving YouTube.
posted a YouTube video and he got his 12 likes, like you were talking about on Facebook. And he could have given up, 6 years, whenever it was. Gary V, he started a wine TV show. He loved wine. His dad owned a wine store. His parents did, and he worked there. I know he didn't. He says he worked there every day of the week, until he was like 24 or whatever. He started a wine TV show on YouTube that was not real successful in the beginning. Nobody knew who Gary Vaynerchuk was. And then he actually helped his parents' business go from like 3 mil to like 60 mil in sales, because he was learning different things, how to send. He was doing email marketing. He was getting
Mm,
like 97% open rates back in the day. And he started doing the idea of selling outside of your store, and he blew it up. And so another thing is, like, he's no different than you and I. He got started. He talked about something he loved. He's embarrassed now. You go back and look at it, like, he's got his hair parted, and he was probably like wearing I know my first 3 episodes, I wore, a dress shirt and I had a blazer on. I was trying too hard. I was trying to be
Nice.
cool. I was trying to be Grant Cardone. I'm like, "I'm not Grant. I don't have a jet. I'm just gonna wear this. I'm wearing a plaid shirt today if you guys are listening, and I'm just kicking back at my house. I'm just having a good time."
Yeah, I don't know if I saw it from your LinkedIn, but I saw today on LinkedIn, someone posted a picture of Taylor Swift, and it's like a picture in picture where her gigs are now with this ridiculous arena, like 120,000 people. And the top is a picture of her ostensibly when she was like 15, and she's on this tiny little stage,
I
and
saw
there's
that.
like a grassy knoll in front of her that shows clearly there's like no one here, and she has
Yeah.
like a white banner just that
Handmade
with
banner, yeah.
yeah,
Or no,
with
it might have
red
been printed, but it was one of those early ones where it's like
yeah,
she probably paid $100 and
and it
it got
literally
it
just
shipped
said
in the mail or
Taylor
something.
Swift, and
Yeah,
there's nobody there, and yeah, I
yeah.
mean, obviously she had to start somewhere.
Friends and family show. Right.
That's cool, man, but yeah,
Yeah.
that it is
I do
inspiring
respect,
and
like, someone like Taylor Swift. I don't have an interest in her music. My daughter might ask for me to put her on here or there, but, and I'll happily do that. I'm a big football fan, so she's been all over in football. It's actually gotten to the point where it's a little bit annoying to not to her fault, but they just keep cutting to her after every play. But I will say this, I respect the hell out of Taylor Swift because I know she played a show or shows for years or before she got recognized in a record deal, and she had to eat it, and she had to do the things that nobody's willing to do anymore. I actually was in bands, and I know that feeling of playing in front of 3 drunk guys. My, thing is I'd play just as hard for 3 drunk dudes as I did when I did get opportunities to play in front of thousands of people at a couple summer festivals we had the opportunity to do. We were opening up for, like, national bands, and so I know that 94% of the people there were for the national band, but they heard us play on this big stage. I played just as hard for the 3 drunk guys, and I think that's what you need to do for your podcast, is not give a shit, pretend, imagine you're talking to 10 billion people, right? There's only, like, 7 on the planet, but, like, 7 billion people are listening to your show.
3 billion, life forms out in space somewhere,
Yeah,
and the 7 billion
e
Earthlings.
exactly, they're all tuning into you right now. What would your energy level be if that was the case? And they all loved you, by the way, they're all raving fans. Have that energy, and you have a chance. If your energy is, "I'm only gonna feel good about this if I see I get 200 downloads per episode," then you're already losing.
It's kinda like the plot of that Tim Allen movie where he, is on the cast of a space show, and these aliens are watching, and they think that he's, like, a planet saver because they've been, watching his show. What was that
Yeah.
movie called?
Is that
Um,
Galaxy Quest?
Galaxy Quest,
Get
that's a
the
good
fuck out of
one,
here.
yeah.
Galaxy Quest comes up
Dude.
on the pod. This
Yes,
is great,
sir.
man.
Alright,
We're gonna get downloads for that. We just talked about Galaxy Quest.
yeah, so tell me
Put that
about,
put that in
if
the show notes for a good, SEO.
absolutely. If someone wants to start a podcast, among other formats, they're thinking about
Yeah,
doing something. Maybe they're thinking about blogging. Maybe they're thinking about writing a book, which is really easier than ever. I was just kind of thinking during
yeah,
our conversation, maybe 5 years ago, you used to like write a book to be like, I'm a thought leader. Because you're like,
mhm,
whoa, Mike has a book. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. That was like,
'Cause
he's a
you felt
published
like if
artist.
someone wanted to publish him, he has to be
Yes.
important, but you could
Now you
really
can
just
just do
publish a book.
Amazon. Yeah, it's like 6
Doesn't mean
clicks.
it's bad. I think it's still a good idea to have a book because there are people who would prefer to, like, hear your story that way too, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, so how would you, think about that out of the various different formats of media that you could do right now? You could just do Instagram, Twitter, any of those things. Why podcast or why not podcast?
Yeah, I think look, the number one thing we need to get before we can do anything in on this planet is get attention. Like if you don't have somebody's
Yeah.
attention, then you can't. If it's sales you're looking to get, then if you're trying to date somebody, if you don't have their attention, right? Like I was thinking about this, recently. Someone said it, and I was like, that, like it hit me because I'm currently single and I work a ton, right? And when I have time off, I always spend it with my daughter. It's like my chances of finding my next person that I'm gonna um, fall in love with, if you're not out there like looking or being the best version of yourself or doing the right things, that person's never going to find you. It doesn't mean that you're not qualified or that they wouldn't like you, but you have to get out there. So my point is you have to get attention if you're in that space too. And so, starting a podcast is just another opportunity to get attention. And also, I think it's a great opportunity for you to meet people, network, all things that you want to do if it's business
Yeah.
related or screw business related. Maybe you want to do something just for fun because you love the food person, but they're not saying nay. The food person says, "Shit, I'm going to do a food podcast because that's really exciting for me and I love doing it." So now they're doing a food podcast because they love it, right? And they can get more attention around it. And if they have a business that's connected to it, good. Because now what you do, your 1 hour podcast, we're going like an hour 15, whatever. This thing could get cut up into so many different segments and so many different social media clips that it's not just the hour we spent together that's valuable, right? It's like little ways that you can put it through your social media and turn it into an actual brand experience, right? So hopefully there are some gems in here that we can pull out for your social media. But the thing is, like, it's not you looking at your audience saying buy for me. Buy every time you talk to them. You're like, hey, this is what we sell. This is what we do. Man, that gets so stale. But if you're putting out great content that's helping people and being interesting, now you got someone's attention. And so when you're ready to throw the jab, like, they already are happy with what you're saying. So now they're like, yeah, I actually would like to buy something from you
Mm.
because they like you. So yeah, I would say, whether it's write a book, start a podcast, do a blog, whatever it might be, some of these things seem kind of like dated already, like blogging seems dated, right? Podcasting, I'm sure soon is going to get that jaded. Oh, you're doing that. It's kind of everybody does it, whatever. I already feel like it's there because I know when I started in 2018, I wasn't looking for anyone to say I was cool because I had a podcast, but I definitely got a lot more of it then than now. It's
Mhm.
just like I don't even tell people like about the podcast right away because it's kind of just a blend in factor. But most, like I'll happily talk about because I love my show and I love doing it. But yeah, in 2018, I probably was more running around like, check out my new podcast, because it was, and people, I had people then say, what's a podcast? Now,
Mm.
nobody and their parents and their grandparents, nobody's confused on what a podcast is, which is a good thing. We finally got there. The tipping point has
We made
happened.
we made it big time. Grandpa and grandma know what a podcast is.
Every sports organization has their own podcast to promote their team, interview their players, and people need to be thinking about themselves, especially if you're a solopreneur, as your own media outlet,
Mm.
right? So that's another reason that podcasting is important because when you record yourself, you never run out of social media content, right? So like you need to think of yourself as a media outlet or the mayor of your own city. So if you're selling real estate, how's someone going to buy a home from you opposed to Sally down the street? If you are doing an awesome job promoting yourself and someone goes to your website and now you got all this content, you got blogs with video, you got audio video, you got a YouTube channel, now you're there. Where someone, Sally, who's selling like it's 1992, the 23-year-old couple is probably not going to buy from her because they're going to go to her website and it might not even load.
Mm.
But if you pull someone up and they got Instagram, YouTube channel, they're talking about ways to, tips and tricks on buying a great home, your first home, young couple, there's a video talking right to them. The young couple's first home. Oh, shit, we get it. We feel it, So now like that is your opportunity to get attention. Um,
You don't even need to hypothesize over that as a possibility. I met a group of real estate agents when I went to the podcast expo in Orlando, Florida. This one real estate agent, he created a channel that was specifically about his town. Um,
yeah.
I don't remember what city. It was one outside of Orlando, but it was like the best pizza restaurant in my town. And he'd go and
Hmm.
he would do like a review of the pizza restaurant, and he'd be like, what to do in this neighborhood. So people would be like, I'm moving to whatever, this city, and where are the best neighborhoods? They'd search it on YouTube and his video would pop up like best neighborhoods in greater Orlando. And then
Hmm.
he at the end he'd be like, well, I'm also a real estate agent, I can help you find a house. And he's like, dude, I would get a lead every single month off that. I'd sell like a $500,000 house. He's like, I was just
Hmm.
crushing it because of that. I was like, wow, that's kind of genius.
You see car salesmen, and every time they sell a car, they take a picture in the parking lot next to the guy who doesn't want to be in the photo, and they're like, "Hey, congratulations, John just bought a new Chevy, whatever, right? And it's like, John doesn't want to be in that photo.
Mhm.
That's not having a social media presence,
Yeah.
right? But if you were out in your parking lot on a slow day and you were talking about reasons that you got some cool cars in, why they're different, and you did some tailored ads behind it, right? And so now you can hit the different, you can obviously pick the demographics, the age, who you want in your audience when you're doing those tailored ads. And so now you can actually get into the people that you want to watch your content as well. And so you now you have a chance, right? So yeah, just doing things the way that they were done even 5 years ago. You need to be thinking about how you're changing, learning, adapting, and growing. We always should be learning on how we can get better. Like Michael Jordan had coaches. It's not because he didn't know how to play ball at the highest level. It's because he wanted to be better than he was today.
Mhm.
You know, like he wanted to always be better the next time he picked up a basketball. Mentally, physically, he's got to be better. It's not like you versus your competition. It's really you versus you. So when you're running your business, look at where you were. Like you should definitely know your competition, and you know any business mentor is going to tell you to study that stuff. But like, look where you are today, and I can be proud of where I was 5 years ago, like how I got to where I'm at today. But I certainly know I'm not even close to getting. I want to be like you, hanging out in Mexico, taking that vacation whenever you want. Um, the biggest driver for me is really spending quality time with my daughter, and the
Mm.
more money I have, the more I can do that, and we can do cool stuff together. So I'm not driven by like um necessarily just a number in a banking account. It's the fact that like a bank account, that means access. Making money to me is access to cool things. This planet, there's certain things you can do for free, but chances are if you want to go travel, you want to see an experience, do something cool, there's a cost behind it. So when people say like money doesn't buy happiness, you can go live on a park bench for a week with no food, you know. All right. That person would be pretty thrilled to have some money right now.
Mhm.
Right. Um, so like, I hate when I hear that, like money doesn't buy happiness. Like if you're not happy and you have money, you got other problems. Now you can use some of that money to hire people to help you out professionally because you probably do have some stuff going on. So yeah, like my thing, I'm driven by like I love the clients I work for and work with. I love putting new podcasts out there. It feels really good. Like Social Chameleon's mission is to produce positive content that inspires people to be brave and bold in pursuit of their dreams and to level up. And so when we're doing shows and I know that our content's going out there into this big sea of other podcasts, like we're a part of that, you know. Um, we're the opposite of the six-pack Pepsi, plastic thing in the ocean that's, like,
Mm.
causing sea turtles
The
to
one you
to
gotta
die.
cut up. Yep.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're the opposite of that. We're putting, like, good, clean, fresh, energy into the ocean of podcasts, so that's why we exist, and it feels good, like, I'll never apologize for jumping on a podcast and saying something that I think can help someone out, like, that's why I'm
Mm.
happy to always do this, you know?
Yeah. Well, going back to money, the saying I really love is money doesn't solve all your problems, but it does solve all your money problems. So it's like those are a lot of the problems that people have,
Yeah,
realistically in today's economy. Like if you break your leg, you're like, I might go bankrupt. Like I might have to go to an emergency room and my bill might be 7 grand and I
yeah,
might go bankrupt. Like
mhm.
having like a savings of cash of 20, 30, 50 grand. It's like, okay, like if something bad happens, like
It's oxygen. You
it's
literally just
oxygen.
exhaled, and that's what cash is, it's oxygen. Like, if you don't have it, you're gonna starve, and,
Yeah, and I talked about this on, last night on the podcast that I was on. This gal, we were talking about, like emotional regulation, and I told her, I was like, I feel like I'm maybe not as emotional as other people. And she goes, why is that? And I was like, well, I've just been in business so long that I've seen so many things happen, good, bad, and indifferent, that I sort of know nothing is going to like ruin us at this point in
mhm,
time. And it's like, okay, like we're getting sued, but it's not a big deal, is it gonna cost us like 5, 10 grand? Like, it might, and it might suck, and it might be really annoying, but,
mhm,
like, I don't need to, like, hold that stress in. Like, I'm sure you've felt those business situations before where you just, like, can't not think about it. Your chest is tight, and it's a physical feeling.
mhm.
We're just sort of past that, and that's a fortunate, thing about having a successful business that's got 10 years now of history. One other thing I did want to say though, because you talked about being able to have a platform, this was really evident to me when I interviewed the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. They were still going through their process of picking the final Libertarian candidate, which he eventually did become the Libertarian candidate for president. So, for all our Libertarians out there, Michael Rechtenwald, 2024, he's going to wreck the regime. But he was like, I just have the biggest platform amongst all the other people that are running. So, essentially, one of the reasons why they picked him amongst others was that he had a larger platform to reach more people than everyone else. And I was like, huh, interesting. Like he has these ideas that he wants to get out, but if he was just like really smart, like hypothetically the best candidate, really smart, really thoughtful, great ideas, but he has like 3 followers on social media, like he won't probably get the candidacy because they
Right.
needed like a splash. And that's true of, all sorts of different situations. Not to mention, this is another thing that I thought of. Like let's say that for whatever reason, we were talking, smack about Alex Earl because I don't think she's a great podcaster. I hope you can continue to get better at it, Alex. But let's say she takes like a public beef against you and me. Like we don't
Mhm.
have the weapons to fight that war.
No.
Like she has all of the weapons, we don't have them. Like imagine
Yeah.
Taylor Swift's like, these guys are sexist. We're just like, no, we're not. Like you can't
Yeah.
fight back. You don't have a platform to fight back. And that
Mhm.
was kind of a realization where I was just like, huh, weird. Like your voice, I don't want to say doesn't matter if you don't have that like recognition by the outside public and media landscape, but it is a lot smaller and a lot harder to do some of the things that you eventually may want to do. And by the time you want to do it, it's too late. You either have it or you don't. So
Mhm.
that was eye opening for me. And I think that's a reason why if people think like I have some things to say and I want to be able to say them, like you got to start early or else you're going to be behind the 8 ball.
I just wanna say too, real quick, the feed has frozen on my end. Do you still see me moving around?
I don't see you moving, Mike, but I can hear you just
Okay.
fine. So
Yeah, I can hear you too. So, the audio version should still be good to go, but I don't know if the video is gonna be frozen here.
yeah, it was like cutting in, cutting back out. But I think that I'm okay on my end, and I only have maybe 1 or 2 more questions, and we can
Yeah,
rock and roll here. But
cool.
so while we're on that topic, what's your impression of podcasting remote versus in person, Mike?
Yeah, I know a couple people have talked to me where they're like anti doing the remote podcast because they had a success. They already were successful doing it with the in person stuff, and I can get that. But like I said, I enjoy it because I get the ability to, now I can talk to people anywhere in the world. It's easier to set up. It's easier to, especially the editing process of it. You have everything saved on your computer. You can get to work on it right away. So the most important thing for me in a podcast. Oop, I think did I lose you completely?
No, I got you.
I don't know if it's did my computer like unplug?
I can still hear you. Can you hear
All
me?
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so let me answer that from the top again. So you were saying, what are my thoughts on?
A remote podcast versus in person.
Yeah, so remote podcasts, the benefits of them are that it's really easy, obviously, to connect with anyone around the world. And you don't have to worry about them flying in and all that good stuff. We talked about it already. But there are some people I know that prefer in person, and the person I'm thinking about that was really making a deal about it, they already had a successful show where it was mostly in person, so they kind of felt like it was a downgrade going to virtual.
Mm,
Um, but I don't personally think it is, because if you have a great conversation with someone, whether it's in person or virtual, that's what's going to connect with your audience. People care about the good stories, the way that you're making them feel, what they walk away. Is this actually something giving people tangible advice that they can go and take action on? If so, it's going to be powerful whether it's in person or not. Um, but I think for the host, it's probably just more fun to be in person. But I don't think the
yeah.
audience cares as much. Especially the audio only audience is definitely not going to care. So
The one thing I would say is, and I know that this might sound esoteric, but I think you'll understand this. there's something important about the vibe, like, between the 2 guests, that if the
Yeah.
vibe is good, then the podcast will be good. And I've just been in podcasts where the vibe maybe, like, wasn't that good, and I think
Mhm.
it's just a little harder to connect via a screen because 'cause we're not like, we're talking, but we're not, like, connecting, and I don't know exactly what that is. Maybe I'm sounding a little, woo-woo
No,
with some of
that's
the things
super
I'm
important. It's
saying,
funny
but
that you say this right now because I don't know what's going on with the tech on my side. It might be on my end here, but, like, my camera is on and I can see that it's recording me, but for some reason, I got a black screen on the,
I have a
string.
frozen picture of your face, but it's not a bad
Okay.
pic, sometimes you get locked at a
New
bad picture,
new profile picture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I got black screen over here, so I don't know what's going on. But, yeah, going back to what you're saying, I think it's just the energy of how you make people feel is always the most important thing. When someone leaves a podcast interview, the best thing they could tell you is like they had a great experience on your
Yeah.
show. And they're not going to have a great experience because you just poured every piece of knowledge into them. Like they're going to have a great experience because you're a great listener and like you're just fun to be around and you have a positive energy. Like that's going to be what matters. So, um, I think that goes for both the host of a show, the guest of a show, and most successful shows, I think, have, it's the personality behind it. It's how you connect with it. Again, it's not the sterile. If you're too boring, if you don't have an interesting show and the content is not good, those shows are not going to perform. But you have a chance if you got a good personality and you got interesting things to say. You definitely have a chance to have a great podcast.
Mike, my last question, you've interviewed so many business owners, really successful ones, some of which some impressive writers, some ones that I'm big fans of, and I know they've made an impact on my business and a lot of other people's business. But are there some common lessons that you see repeating yourself from these business owners?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's like, okay, well, what did I learn from over these 200 episodes? If I was to write my book based on what they were saying, what would be the common denominators? And Alex, I'm actually going to be doing that in the near future. So I'm putting it out on
Nice.
the air. Then I'm going to do something like a mic'd up book that is going to put things into chapters. So based on like, hey, we talked a lot about startups, and this one's talking about a lot about comeback stories or people in the tech space. There might be a chapter about those. I'm not trying to not answer your question, but I just wanted to share that. I'd say, the biggest thing that's come up, like I'd say the thing that has come up the most would be imposter syndrome.
Mm,
Because whether I'm talking to someone who's just starting out or I'm talking to Ed Milet, like imposter syndrome is a real thing. Tom Brady just got roasted. It was a great roast on Netflix, and love him or hate him, you could tell he was uncomfortable about stuff. And when people were ripping on him, you can kind of tell his level of how bad it hit him. Like if he was laughing hard, like he's just having a blast, or if he kind of was sitting there a little bit like that one stung.
mhm,
So like someone as big and famous and as successful as that still has stuff where I'm sure if you tell him, you know, Peyton Manning did this better than you, he's gonna have a feeling about it, and
mm,
we do that in business, and we're always trying to compare ourselves to the next Instagrammer or podcaster. They're doing better than us in this field or whatever, and we got this imposter syndrome that most of it's manufactured. I think the greatest people in any field, business or podcast, doesn't matter who it is, athlete, where you really can see someone excel is when they're able to really connect with their own inner voice, and that positive self-talk is really strong because the world will come and it will attack in different ways, right? But if you have your own voice attacking you and that imposter syndrome kicks in,
mm,
it's really hard to succeed, because we can be listening to the wrong thing. And I've had it, I've lived through it. It's gotten me in depression before, and then I had to literally like reverse engineer a way to get myself thinking positive again. Um, so I would say that is definitely the first thing that jumps out to me is at any level of the people that I've interviewed, imposter syndrome seems to be the most common thing that they're working through.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I feel it, you know?
Yeah.
We have the audacity to get on, talk for 2 hours, and people go,
Mhm.
"Alex, you should do solo podcasts," and I'm like, "Nobody wants to listen to me talk." Like, I don't have
Yeah.
anything to say. It's like,
Right.
but sure, someone will listen when Mike's on the podcast. So
Yeah. And that
I'm
no,
not
you
sure if that
definitely
ever
should do
go.
some
I'm not
solo.
sure. I don't know if that ever goes away. I think you can manage it, but I don't know if you can beat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
had
agree.
someone just on the podcast. They say we don't use the cure word. We use heal. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
that's good. We don't say you're gonna cure it. You can heal. So I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
Mike,
and then I got one little other add-on and then
please, please.
so another one of my favorite lessons I've learned through podcasting, so it's a little different to your last question, is that everything happens for you, not to you. And I originally learned that through a guy I mentioned a bunch of times so far is Ed Milet.
Mm,
And when I started to think about, you know, my situation with my marriage or whenever my business seemed to be failing or going in the wrong direction, you could look at it in a way where, "Why man, woe is me. Why is this happening? I'm all down on myself. I feel like nothing's working right." And you put all your energy on that. But if you change the vision and all you're doing is changing the lens of the glasses you're looking at it, right? It's the same thing that just happened. One person feels, "Woe is me." They're down on their luck. They're feeling terrible about themselves. The other person looks at it like, all right, how can I take what just happened and learn something from it? Whether it's a lesson, it's a way of life. I'm going to change myself. I'm not going to let that happen again to me. I'm going to pick myself up and build myself back up. Hey, that's not, if you're on ground level, you can be depressed, or you can say, now I have an opportunity to rebuild myself up and be who I want to be.
mm,
Right? I can actually start build like, if you've already built something up and it's not who you wanna be, there's a lot of people in relationships, man, they're smiling for the camera, they're smiling in those Christmas photos where everyone's wearing the same pajamas, but they might be miserable inside, you know? But the person who just got divorced, hey, that sucks. Well, that person gets to rebuild themselves up and be the man or woman that they wanna be, so that look at it with that lens.
clean
Um
slate.
in a financial situation, you just went through shit and it's like, man, how can there's no good that can come from it. Well, there are a lot of good things because what did you do wrong that caused you to get there? You actually have that knowledge now. It stinks that you're in that situation. But um, when you look at the world like things happen for you, not to you, man, it just changes the way that you're going to operate.
Yeah. There's been about 100 billion people that have lived throughout human history. So you're one of the 10 or so billion that are actually alive at this moment in time. Like how privileged are you, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have all your limbs and faculties and you're living in the first world. Like and you're living in this era where we can,
Yeah.
DoorDash food to our house in 25 minutes if we so choose. Like it's not that bad. Like let's be
The Grant Cardone
realistic.
response to that would be, "Don't be a bitch."
Yeah, that's a summation of it,
Yeah.
but come on, like, let's view things from, like, the lens of reality, not
Yeah.
your small viewpoint of the world. Because you don't make $29 an hour, you only make 22. It's like, okay, life's not that bad.
The word to summarize it, is gratitude. When I learned
Absolutely.
about gratitude, I mean, I actually sign off every episode with "Be great and be grateful." That's what the BGBG is on all of my like merch and my profile pictures and stuff. Be great, be grateful. Once I learned gratitude, when you're actually in a genuine feeling of gratitude, when you're reflecting in the morning or at night, I recommend doing it both, like early morning and before you go to bed. um you whatever you're feeling, that self-doubt or feeling bad about the bills come, like I got to pay this, or I got hit with this situation, or I got a flat tire, whatever happened that day that's kind of got you down. When you get to gratitude, you're just talking about like, I'm one of 7 billion people that are living and alive during 2024, when we're in a world of, the amazing technology we have and the healthcare that we do have, compared to, 100 years ago, people wouldn't make it past age 50 if they worked in like a laborious field, because
Mhm,
that's just like, that was the life expectancy. But now we can
mhm.
get to 100 years on a regular, and just so you think about that, hey, I get to be here. A father could be super distraught because they only get to see their kids 6 days a month. And I totally understand and can feel that. But if they think now in gratitude, I get to see my daughter, because you know what? Right now, today, there's people who 9-year-old daughter uh, had a health issue, is hospitalized, got in a car accident, and passed away. So if you're only saying I get to see them 6 days a month and you're sad about it, like if you reflect in gratitude, think about how amazing it is to make the most of that time. Um, and then, when you take gratitude and you actually apply it and you stomach it, it's really powerful. I don't know how to explain it really, but like hopefully I just did a little bit of a good job there. But that's super powerful for me.
No, that's a fantastic perspective, Mike. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hopefully you
Mike,
guys can see me if you're watching on YouTube. I'm not just a black rectangle.
you're a handsome fella, whether you're in live motion or stop motion. Mike, tell people where they can find you and about some of the content that you make.
Yeah, go to mikeduppodcast.com and it's MIKED uppodcast.com if you want to check the show out. If you're interested in anything we're doing at Social Chameleon, you can go to socialchameleon.us, and I'm sure Alex will have that clickable in the notes for you.
For sure.
And then I'm on social media at Mike DiCioccio. Just keep it simple.
Mike, thank you, man. I appreciate you. We'll have you
Yeah.
out once the new facility's built. We'll get you in here in person. We'll do the thing.
Yeah, I'm there, man. Just tell me when.
I appreciate you, Mike.
All
Thank you,
right.
man. Have a good
Cheers.
night.